Hello, I'm Tara Brabazon, and welcome to the Post 34, Expertise Without Apologies. We live in a time that doesn't like expertise very much. We live in a period of information, not knowledge, infomercials rather than fact-checking, and Twitter pylons rather than quiet reflection. So it seems potent and powerful today, together, that we think about the nature of expertise. And I'm going to be guided in this journey with a great and remarkable scholar, Tom Nichols, and his book, The Death of Expertise, the campaign against established knowledge and why it matters. Now, this is a tough book. This is an important book. Like the best of books, it creates a thinking space. I don't agree with all of it. We shouldn't agree with all of it, but we should rehearse and think through the arguments that are being made. This book was published by Oxford University Press in 2017. But think about what's happened since this book was published, right? We've got Brexit, Trump and COVID, we've got the January 6th uprising, we've got the Freedom Convoy, and we've got the occupation of central Wellington. Now, all these stunning events where all of us sort of went, what is going on? These events gain a new lens and a new frame when we think about expertise and the Nichols argument. Now, Thomas Nichols in and of himself is an intriguing intellectual, social and political figure, has had an inspirational academic career. He's a retired professor now from the US War College. He remains a specialist in international affairs, particularly on Russia and particularly nuclear weaponry. So what's important is he has described himself as a conservative, but importantly he offers a corrective. He describes himself as, quote, a never Trump conservative. And that's going to become important in a sec. Neither of his parents finished high school. His father's family were Greek immigrants. His mother's family were Irish immigrants. Brilliant. And he gained a BA from Boston University, his master's from Columbia, and his PhD from Georgetown University. He finished his thesis in 1988, and the thesis was titled, quote, The Politics of Doctrine, Khrushchev, Gorbachev and the Soviet Military. Brilliant. Bizarrely, his other claim to fame is he is a 5-time Jeopardy champion. Right, so for all the quizzes out there, all the game show people out there, I love me a game show. All the quizzes, all the game show people, he is one of us. Quizzes rule. Okay, so he has experienced a reasonably privileged academic pathway through his life, particularly when his professional pathway is compared to my generation, which is the generation after, and of course the experience of current colleagues. So after his doctorate was completed in 1989, he was appointed to a tenured faculty position at Dartmouth College, and he worked there until 1997. Then he became Professor of Strategy at the US Naval War College and later became the Professor of National Security Affairs. He retired in 2022. So think about that. Post a PhD, he's had only two tenured professorial posts. So he's also had, I think, visiting and adjunct posts at LaSalle and also at Harvard. But think about the stability of that type of employment. In your entire career, you've worked at 2 universities. And that's going to, when we talk about his views on higher education, just remember his experience there. 2 universities, 2 pretty good universities too. But politically, he was deeply challenged by the Trump presidency, and he argued in 2016 that conservatives should vote for Hillary Clinton because Donald Trump was, quote, too mentally unstable, end of quote, to be commander-in-chief. Wow. So he actually left the Republican Party when Brett Kavanaugh was confirmed to the Supreme Court of the United States. So this year, this is his year of his retirement, but he's still offered these remarkable commentaries about the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and he has described Russia being, quote, hated for decades to come. End of quote. He's published 8 books through his career, mostly about national security, and he has 72 refereed articles. Now, as occurs in most areas of political history and political science, most of these articles are singly authored, right? But his career is not conventional, but is nested around national security topics, except for one book, The Death of Expertise, the campaign against established knowledge and why it matters. So we have a conservative man, we have a career academic offering his view of expertise. Oh yeah, let's do this. Right, so Tom Nichols argued that the, quote, phrase, death of expertise, quote, is a phrase of self-importance, like, oh, death of expertise, it's about self-importance. But it's also a phrase of warning. He says that, quote, the United States is now a country obsessed with the worship of its own ignorance, end of quote. He argues that we've now reached this really difficult moment where we're rejecting the advice of experts, we're rejecting expertise, and that's become a source of pride because it's become a source of autonomy. Because when we reject the words of experts, when we reject expertise, it protects the ego of a citizen so that they never have to confront the reality that they may be wrong. So the freedom to be ignorant is more important than the freedom to listen or the freedom to learn. So there it is. There it is. There's the argument. That's how Brexit happened. That's how Donald Trump happened. All the weird behaviour about COVID, toilet paper riots, anybody? And all the weird opinions that created January 6 and the Freedom Convoy and the occupation of Wellington. So all of this was about a desire for autonomy, a desire for freedom. And of course, that desire for freedom requires a distaste for the intellectual. And this desire to express opinion over expertise was conveyed with anger, righteous anger. So, what's going on here? Well, this is a product of narcissism, a disdain of expertise, and a desire to self-actualize our importance without evidence. Okay, the legendary Isaac Asimov recognised this problem really early. Quote, there's been a cult of ignorance in the United States, and there always has been. A strain of anti-intellectualism has been a constant thread winding its way through our political and cultural life, nurtured by the false notion that democracy means that my ignorance is as good as your knowledge. End of quote. So this moment is based on a bizarre irony. There's never been more high quality information on this planet than there is right now. Anybody with an internet connection can find high quality open access material today, quickly now. And therefore we are all actively choosing every day not to search and read this high quality information. Instead, millions upon millions of people, to quote Nichols, quote, reject the fundamental rules of evidence, end of quote, and are seeking out goat videos, love me a good goat video, but seeking out goat videos or how to apply magnetic eyelashes. So this means that expertise has been reduced to technical competence, yeah? And also expertise is only used to solve short-term problems or emergencies. These are key points for us all to think about. It's not a matter of agreeing or disagreeing, but just think about these ideas in our daily life and in our research. Nichols argues that citizens do not want to have a conversation with experts, and experts, particularly in the university sector, have, quote, abandoned their duty to engage with the public, end of quote. Ooh. Right. Now, I would argue the inverse of this argument, and let me present the evidence, because there's never been more attention in our universities to research impact, research engagement, and national research metrics and funding are riding on research dissemination, research partnerships, collaborations, co-designs. So we have the citizen science movement, we have the open access movement, and freely available podcasts and videos from academics like you are watching today. And can I note once more, as we started in the post, the overwhelming majority of the remarkable people who have watched my videos for years are not currently enrolled or working in a university. So that's why I won't get emotional, but that's why I appreciate you all so much, because every week you make a decision to spend 30 minutes of your life with me while you're commuting, while you're going for a walk, while you're on the treadmill on Saturday morning, and I thank you for that. But you deserve incredible respect for that, because you are making decisions to engage with complicated, difficult information that you may not agree with, but you are making that decision every week. And also think about social media. Citizens can find directly the greatest citizens in the world, the greatest scholars in the world, because disintermediated media, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, on we go. And these great scholars can be found, you can contact them, you can engage with them, you can read their feed, and you can ask questions. Now, these pathways to academics, to scholars, to experts did not exist 10 years ago. And there are millions upon millions of academics who are working incredibly hard to collaborate, to enact co-design and disseminate in powerful and innovative ways. So my 3Ds, disintermediation, deterritorialisation and digitisation, have enabled all sorts of new pathways between citizens and scholars and citizens and experts in diverse organisations. The problem is, here we go, the problem is that expertise is read as elitism in an era of populism. Here we go. Now, populism is not popular culture. Popular culture has an evidential base to it. So what I mean is popular culture is popular. Most people have bought it, are dancing to it, have worn it, have enjoyed it, have lived with it. So most of the population engage in popular culture. Popular culture is the dominant culture. Now, populism skips this representational stage. So the politicians, particularly, who represent a minority of people, pretend that they represent the majority. So how do populists do this? Well, they use phrases like, most people agree with me. Everybody knows this, right? So they summon this invisible army, whereas actually, of course, it's not the majority. It is a visible and vocal minority that are shouting over the views of the majority. And I would argue that's why we're in the mess we're in. So expertise is the enemy of populism and populist leaders, and expertise is discredited as being elitist and fostering elitism. Now, the problem we've got is that scholarly achievement is difficult. It is difficult, it is challenging to put yourself up for assessment and evaluation in your degrees. It is tough to put yourself up for assessment and evaluation in peer review time and time again, and put yourself up for assessment and evaluation for every job that you apply for. And remember, just over 1% of the world's population holds a PhD. So this is an elite qualification because it is difficult. But should this elitism and the expertise that it represents be dismissed as irrelevant or foolish or unimportant or boring? And that really is the question of our time. That's it. are the people that work hard, sacrifice their present for a future, study and test themselves. Should these people be ridiculed as elitist? So what we've got is a confusion between populism and elitism and democracy and expertise. Now, Nichols stated that, quote, Americans now believe that having equal rights in a political system also means that each person's opinion about anything must be accepted as equal to anyone else's, end of quote. Yeah. So we're returning to that really complicated, granular question. Is expertise elitism? And you know what? It probably is, because expertise is based on doing something that most of the population can't do. So finishing high school, finishing a bachelor degree, finishing honours, finishing a master's degree, completing a doctorate, getting up early, staying up late to research and to submit ourselves time and time and time again to peer review and a quality assessment. Right, that is expertise. Instead, confirmation bias is so much easier to action, because expertise is about understanding the gap in our knowledge, logging that gap, recognising it and reading experts in that gap to improve what we know. But confirmation bias involves only seeking out the people who agree with us, only reading what we understand, only following people on Twitter that we agree with. And of course, this is the Dunning-Kruger effect most famously. The less we know, the more confident we are about what we do know. So the incompetent then are removed from the ability or capacity to recognise their own incompetence. Experts read widely and we read with diversity, and because we engage with diverse ideas, we make fewer mistakes, okay? Make fewer mistakes because we read ideas that we disagree with and therefore have to take those arguments on board. Now, Donald Trump was the peak moment for what Nichols described as, quote, the low information voter, end of quote. But this is not an issue in or of the United States. This is a combination of low information literacy, populism, digitisation, disintermediation and deterritorialisation, and confirmation bias. Those four variables come together. And that means, because of those four variables, a large minority of our citizens are able to move through their lives without ever confronting critique or questioning, without really confronting alternative ideas, and also being able to emotionally connect from the welfare and care of people that are not like them. So as you can see, expertise is not only about knowledge, but it's the knowledge we gain through metacognition. Now, at its most basic, metacognition is the ability to know when something is not going well, to take a step back, realise I am in error, something's going wrong here, I am in error, work out what the error may be, engage expertise, read and engage expertise in the sphere of that error, gather new information and attempt the process again. So note the important moments in metacognition. A recognition that we know what we do not know. Yeah. We gather new information, new evidence beyond ourselves using expertise. And then we reflect and reassess in light of that expertise and attempt the argument or the process or the experiment again. So peer review is the greatest strategy that exists to overcome confirmation bias, alongside external examination of undergraduate courses, as exists very commonly in the United Kingdom, and obviously full external international examination of doctorates. Universities, therefore, as you can see, at their best, we have strong strategies to validate expertise and validate the metrics of this expertise as it moves through diverse audiences. That might be through consultancies, through citizen science, altmetrics, proliferation and understanding of research ethics, and other impact and engagement strategies and protocols. So a tweet is not subjected to peer review. Instead, tweets come and go as easily as confirmation bias. The key to expertise, I believe, is the capacity to seek out, examine and understand new information, to disconnect emotion, disconnect your personal biases, and reevaluate a view or a hypothesis or an argument. But the challenge in this argument that values reading and writing and thinking and education is that our universities have changed. Nichols argues that our degrees now affirm attendance, not education, and they exist to support the subjectivities and the opinions of students. Wow. Okay. Well, there's a lot of evidence that verifies his case. Think about Rate My Professor. Not only does it rank the hotness of the professor, but the easiness of the course. Is an easy course of value? A university degree is meant to be challenging. That's what it's meant to be. And if it's not, to be frank, it's not a university degree. Populism has also had an impact on education. And students, of course, are no longer students. They're now customers or clients. And if they're paying for this university education, then shouldn't our customers all pass? Now, we have the very recent case from New York University validating a student petition about Professor Maitland Jones Jr.'s chemistry class. Now, all sorts of newspapers around the world told this tabloidized story of this gentleman's class, and sort of the tabloidization of this story even entered The Guardian. The Guardian's headline was, quote, "New York University professor fired after student says his class was too hard," end of quote. That was The Guardian. And then, of course, we've got the New York Times that asked the really important question: who is responsible if a student fails a university course? So 80 students out of the 350 students enrolled in this organic chemistry course signed a petition, and they complained about the grades, they complained about the teaching, and they complained about the assistance they received during the COVID pandemic. The students complained that the course was too hard and they lacked resources. Okay, let's get to this, right? So organic chemistry is difficult. It is really difficult. And look, university education, more generally, is difficult. That's the point. And I think all of us have swallowed for 20 years this nonsense metric that student reviews offer any commentary at all on the quality of an education, because populism does not measure quality. And these metrics use student reviews, they use the pass rates in courses, and it means what we've done is we've traded an economic imperative, that is the cost of a degree to students, for the quality imperative, the quality of the learning. Okay, there is a series of problems, I think, that we have with higher education and the education quality at the moment. To give you one example, I taught a first-year course in Canada when I was a professor of communication, CALM, and I taught Introduction to Communication. And huge course, and there were a large number of fourth-year students in this first-year course. Why? Because it was seen to be an easy elective, because CALM is seen to be an easy elective. Okay, so over 300 students enrolled in this course. I had no TA, no teaching assistant. I marked all the papers for every student in the semester, and I could not tell the difference between the papers written by the first years and the papers written by the fourth years. And indeed, when I compiled up, I shielded the names as I always do, when I compiled up the final grade in gradebook and did all the sums and got the final grades, the top 20 students in that course were all first year students. So all those fourth year students in a first year course, not one of them got into the top 20 in that course. So they learned that little in those extra years. I couldn't tell the difference from first year students that had just started the degree. Now clearly I demand, and have always demanded, high levels of reading and writing and thinking in my courses. And remember, I've taught first year students for 20 years. It is the most important work we do in our universities, and I have high expectations. And yes, I use multimodal information scaffolds, so we make sure that the standards can be maintained without standardisation to those standards, absolutely. And standards do not require standardisation. We have lots of different andragogical methods now to reach a high quality learning experience. But the standards must not be reduced. And the idea that a student can offer a commentary about the expertise of a university academic, this is where it's getting a bit messy. This is a problem that we have to talk about, because an academic knows more than a student, full stop. Now, a student must not be disrespected. They must be respected as learners. But we need to remember that academics have the qualifications and they have the expertise. Now, the challenge is the next step where we move on from this argument. And this is where Tom Nichols and I do differ somewhat. He states, quote, "There are too many students, a fair number of whom simply don't belong in college." End of quote. Now for me, this is the jump the shark moment. We are absolutely in agreement. Academics know more than students, tick. Higher education courses must be difficult, yes, tick. Students fail, tick. Absolutely. None of those statements mean that a student does not have the right to have a go at a university course, because universities are funded by taxpayers of all our nations, and taxpayers should not endlessly, generation upon generation, be funding other people's children to go to university because they're from a particular class or a particular background or a particular race. And remember, the diversity of students in our universities right now is amazing, is inspiring. How many students we've got? Over 25, over 35, over 50, over 70. Brilliant. Indigenous, First Nation students, of course women, rainbow students. Higher education is about ability. It is about excellence. So how do we know, quote, who does not belong in a university? End of quote. Now remember, our historical models of higher education are based on affluent private schoolboys, white, privileged, moving into a funded university spot, they pay no fees, and gained a scholarship or stipend to go to university. That's our historic model for higher education. So when we democratise who goes to a university, we have to transform our andragogical models, our teaching and learning design. We have to maintain standards without standardisation. And Nichols, besides wanting to reduce the number of students in our universities, argued that, quote, lesser schools have no business offering advanced degrees. End of quote. Again, we diverge. He argues that enrolments in PhDs should be reduced to a few elite universities. Yes, right. Now, that's a mistake. Tell you why. The quality of PhDs is determined by the examiners. That is, examiners are not from the institution in which the students are enrolled. Quality in a PhD is determined by international examiners. So the argument Nichols offers is that universities need to be well funded by governments and industry funding to ensure the quality of student research. That's the argument. And I respect that argument. I am going to argue that it's incorrect, and I'll tell you why. Firstly, a large amount of research infrastructure is required for a few research areas. So obviously experimental physics, chemistry, biology, medical sciences, some of the allied health professions. A synchrotron is important for some subjects. You're going to need the beam time. I get all of that. But for most disciplines, most subjects in which most PhD students are enrolled, they do not require this costly infrastructure. Further, national review processes like the RAE and the REF in the United Kingdom discovered that research excellence was not locked into the Russell Group, the posh universities, the elite universities. They were hoping, obviously, they'd do the peer review of all the disciplines and all the great research would happen in the elite universities. And they found through peer review that is not the case. And so they had to invent a new phrase to describe the excellence that existed throughout the entire sector. So they came up with that great phrase, quote, pockets of excellence. That great phrase. So research excellence exists throughout the sector. So in some disciplines, Nottingham Trent is much better in terms of research excellence and teaching excellence than Nottingham. Okay. So the assumption that the elite universities with plenty of money produce the best research in all disciplines is simply wrong. Further, Nichols has ignored regional universities. The universities in our small cities, large towns, what I call third-tier cities, provide an incredible service to local government, local communities, and their regions. And if we enact what I describe as a full economic costing of higher education, we do a full economic costing of higher education, then we see our regional universities are incredibly important and incredibly efficient. Having said that, our regional universities around the world have hit some problems, and their challenges of governance and regulation, particularly over appointments and particularly over leadership appointments. That's not debatable. So much is going wrong in regional universities, but that's not because of the remarkable people in those cities and towns. They're not going wrong because of the towns. But the problem is we're applying metropolitan, big city ideas about universities to universities in the regions. And we need to understand the very delicate regional economies, the specific workforce and funding challenges in health and in education, and the necessity to hire excellent scholars in our regional universities. Hire people with a commitment to the regions, a commitment to the regional university project rather than sort of a personal stepping stone for 3 or 4 years and then move on back into a big city, right? Most disciplines in our universities do not require the provision of large funds or large infrastructure. Excellence can exist anywhere, including regional universities. So making a decision that regional universities are deficit or marginal or secondary to the large branded universities and making a decision to remove higher degrees from them is an absolute catastrophic mistake. It works actually against Tom Nichols' wider argument about the need to have expertise throughout all our nations, noting that expertise in regional universities enables high quality local government, good strong local education including early childhood education. Small and medium-sized enterprises have expertise to enable their development, and of course public and allied healthcare improves. So all of this discussion of expertise must commence from a single truth. there are people in this world who know more about a topic than other people. University academics hold a specialist expertise as a result of specialist education. Education is not a client service. Students are not customers, and they're not ranking a professor like you would rank a purchase from Amazon. We have a messy relationship at the moment between expertise and democracy, and it's made worse every time a political leader dismisses an expert or dismisses an evidence-driven argument. Every human being, every single human being has value. Every human being is equal to another human being, and every single one of us have the right to live and breathe and work and think and create and enjoy leisure. But we can be human and not an expert. We can hold rights and not be an expert. We can enact responsibilities and not be an expert. Public policy that enables health and educational outcomes has to be founded on expertise, on evidence, and on verification and testing. We live in selfish and self-absorbed times. Personal control, choice, individualism, they're our goals. And of course, they're a lot easier to sell than information literacy, preventative health, and commitment to public education. But we've just lived through the costs of short-termism, bad decision-making, using personal experience rather than policy instrumentation that incorporates expertise. For those of us in our universities, we can throw up our hands, we can do a dummy spit, we can grumble bum about the state of the world, but that does not solve our social, our personal, our political, or our professional problems. So let's focus back again on the fundamentals. High standards in curricular design. Intricate andragogy to maintain standards without standardisation. Ensure that the best of researchers teach the next generation of professionals, of scholars, of journalists and citizens. Let's maintain the highest standards of research excellence, research rigour, and know that our research process doesn't end with publication, but continues with dissemination of scope and scale and punch. Education always matters because it is transformative of individuals and our society. So let's commit to learning, to improve our way of living. I wish you love, light and peace. Tea out.